In this video, I'm going to be walking through all of the Photoshop tools that you're likely to use when creating your graphics in Adobe Photoshop. The tools are all of the icons that go down the left-hand side of the screen. So you can see down the left here, you've got loads of different icons and each one of them does something different. There are some icons in here and some tools which you probably won't use. For example, there's some in there that I've never used before and I've been using Photoshop for over 10 years. So rather than go through every single one, I'm just going to use the ones that are commonly used in graphic design and for things like creating social media graphics, creating graphics for your blog or your website, and creating craft graphics and printables. If for any reason you don't see this list of icons down the left side of the screen, you can make it appear again by clicking into Window in the top and then going down to the bottom to where it says Tools, and then just click on that and it will appear. If I click on it now when mine are already there, you can see that's made them disappear. To get them back again, it's just Window in the top menu, click Tools, and they'll come back again. Some of the tools have a little triangle icon in the bottom right, and that means that there's hidden tools underneath the one that's currently available. You can access these by right-clicking on the tool, and then you get an option with all the different ones that sit there, and to choose a different one, all you need to do is click it, and the icon will update in the Tools menu, and that means that you've selected the other tool. To put it back to the original one, just right-click again, choose the other one, and it will come back. The first tool we're going to explore is the Move tool, which is the very top one that shows in your menu. And this looks like kind of like a compass with two sets of arrows crossed over each other. When you hover over it in the Tools menu, you'll get a little pop-up which just explains what the tool's called and a little bit of instruction from Photoshop as to how to use it. If you don't have an icon that looks like this, it probably means you've got the Artboard tool selected. So just right-click and then make sure you click on Move tool, and that will get your Move tool ready for you. So to show you how it works, I'm going to just click on a layer in my layers palette. I've got this one selected, which is my border, and then all I need to do to move it is click and drag, and it will move that layer for me. So I'm just going to hit undo by hitting Ctrl and Z. If I choose a different layer just by single clicking in the layers palette, then I can move that layer instead. If you want to resize something, you can do that using the Move tool as well. So at the top of the screen, you've got another menu here, and this will change for every tool that you click on. But for the Move tool, it looks like this. So you've got a few different options, but if you want to resize something, click on where it says Show Transform Controls. And that will put a box around the edge of your layer, and you can grab the edges and click and drag to resize. And when you're happy with the size, just let go with your mouse, hit enter on your keyboard, and then that's been resized for you. If you want to auto-select a layer, so if you don't want to have to scroll through your layers palette all the time to try and find something, just take the little box that says auto-select, and now when you click, you can see it's automatically picked up these layers for me. So if I click away, I can get the background. Click here and I've got the frame, and click in the middle and I've got the puppy picture. If you're using layer groups, then if you click into the little drop down and click group, then when you're selecting your layers, it will select the whole groups rather than just a layer, which lets you move everything inside the group at the same time. The next tool is the Marquee tool, and this lets you select parts of a graphic or a layer so that you can manipulate them, for example by resizing them or moving them or copying and pasting them onto a different design. So I've got my Marquee tool selected over here, and then with this photograph I can click and drag around the puppy to make a rectangle, hit Ctrl and C on my keyboard. And then I'm going to go over to my design here that you saw earlier and hit Ctrl and V to paste. and that's pasted on the part of the photograph that I just copied. And I can then use the Move tool with the Show Transform Controls button ticked to resize it if I want to. So I'm going to go ahead and delete him and go back over to show you some other parts of the Marquee tool. If you've selected part of the Marquee, then you can get away from it by just making sure you've still got the Marquee tool selected and just click off of the part that you selected, and that selection will go away. There's an option at the top called Feather. If you add a higher number into here, when you select something with the Marquee tool, it will give it a softer edge. So if I put 20 in here and I drag around the puppy again, and this time it's put little rounded corners on the edge of my selection instead of the hard corners that were there before. If I hit Ctrl and C to copy, and then I'm just going to hide this layer and Ctrl and V to paste, I'll zoom in a bit. You can see that what this has done, oh, my zooming isn't working, there we go, computer's being slow. So this time, because we've had the feather at 20, it's given a really soft edge to the photograph, which can be quite a pretty effect when you're creating graphics. The higher you make the number, the greater the soft effect will be on the edges. So I'm just going to go and hit that back to 0, because usually you'll probably want to have the nice straight edges, but I just wanted to show you how that works. If I delete this layer and then put the original one back, go over to the Marquee tool on the right hand side and right click, you can see there's other options in here too. The elliptical Marquee tool lets you select circles. So if I click into that and click and drag, now I'm making an oval around the puppy. If you want to select a perfect circle, hold Shift when you're creating the shape, and this will make it stay in that perfect circle shape. So if I let go with my mouse now, hit Ctrl and C to copy, and then hide my original layer and Ctrl and V to paste. This time it's cut it into a circle, and it's still got the feathery edge, because if you look, I've got my elliptical Marquee tool selected and my feather is at 20. If I put that to 0 and then go back to my original and copy again around the dog, so Ctrl and C to copy, Ctrl and V to paste, it's given it a harsh edge this time because the feather was set to 0. So if I put these two side by side, you can see how the feathering really makes a difference to the edges of your photos. The next tool is the Lasso tool, which is the third one down. There's 3 different options in here. The 2 you'll probably use most often are the first 2. So if I go into the Lasso tool as the first one, what this lets you do is click and drag with your mouse to create a freehand shape on your layer that you can then copy or move. So I've gone around the edge of the puppy. If I hit Ctrl and C to copy, hide that, and then Ctrl and V to paste, you can see it's cut out where I clicked and dragged my shape. If I delete that one, put my little puppy back, go back over to the Move tool, the Lasso tool, and right click. This time I'm going to select the second one, and this works slightly differently. So rather than freehand, this lets you click and then a straight line comes out until you click again, and then it saves that point where you click, so you can create a geometric shape just by clicking. And when you get back to the beginning, just hover your mouse near to your original point, and then you'll get a little circle come up on your cursor. And if you click when you see the circle, that completes the whole shape for you. So now I can copy and hide the original and hit paste, and it's cut out that shape for me exactly as I just drew it. The Magic Wand tool lets you select parts of an image that match in terms of colour. So if I select the Magic Wand tool, I go over to this dinosaur, and if I click into its body, it's selected all of this blue inside of the main body. So just to show you what it's selected, if I hit delete and click away, you can see it's deleted the main blue inside of the dinosaur. You can do this for any different part of your design. So if I click into one of the spikes and hit delete, it will get rid of that colour. If you want to select all instances of the same colour on the whole layer, go up to the top of the screen and then there's a box here. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it, but I'm going to say contiguous perhaps. Anyway, it's a tick box, and if you untick that one and then click into a colour again, this time it will select every single part of the layer that has that colour. When you're doing it, if you find that it's not quite picking up every single bit of colour, it might be because it's using slightly different versions of that colour. Now this probably isn't a very good example to show you on because it's only 2 complete solid colours. So if I go back over to my puppy and choose the magic wand tool, and I'm going to click into the background. Oops, I need to remember to put that tick back on because I don't want it to select everything. Right, so if I click here, you can see it's selected only part of this background because that's where it thinks the colours match. To add more to your selection, you can hold the Shift key down and then click near to where the selection is, and then it will include that part in this selection as well. So this is a quick way to remove backgrounds if you've got lots of similar colours. It might take you a little while if your background has loads of different colours in it like this one does with all the different shades of green. But if you persevere with it, eventually you'll have everything selected, and then you can just delete your background if you want to remove it by hitting the delete key, and that will disappear. If I undo this one, there is a way to make the magic wand tool pick up more parts of the colour. So if I click onto it again, you've got a box here called tolerance. This is set at 32 by default, so normally you want to keep it at that. But if you want to select more colour range, then if you increase that number, if I put mine to 80, and now if I click onto the background, you can see it's selected a lot more on that initial click than it did originally. And that's because it's now selecting more matching colours. In this instance, that's not going to work very well because you can see it's now cut into the puppy, which I probably don't want it to do. So 80 was a little bit high in this case, but you can play around with different numbers until you find one which works well for the graphic that you're currently trying to select. Just going to put that back to 32 so I don't forget. The crop tool lets you crop your graphic, your file that you're working on, into different sizes. So all you need to do is click on it and then click and drag onto your graphic, and it'll create this box for you. If you've not got the size quite right, you can use the corners to change it, either bigger or smaller. And then to crop, press enter on your keyboard, and that's now cropped that file for me. If I just undo this, when you've dragged your box, if you want to, you can also rotate your image, and then when you crop it by pressing enter, it keeps that rotation, but your outer image remains square. The frame tool is something new for Photoshop 2019, and this lets you crop images into exact sizes really easily whilst keeping them on your original design. So if I click into this and then click and drag around my little puppy, it's automatically changed it so that it's the size of that rectangle I clicked, but it's kept it on my original file. So rather than the crop tool, which crops everything, so all of your layers will resize, it's only resized that one layer. You can use it in other ways too. So if I just undo this change and go over to my new file over here, and then I'm going to click circle on the top. So you've got a menu at the top. You can either do squares or circles. So in this instance, I'll do a circle. If I click and drag on here and hold the Shift key to make an exact circle and let go, I've now got a circle here. So if I press enter on my keyboard just to get that circle set, go back over to my puppy, I'm going to hit Control and A to copy, to select everything, Control and C to copy, go over to my new file, and I've got my layer of this circle selected, and hit Control and V to paste. And what that does is it pastes your picture inside of that circle and automatically crops it to that shape. If you then select the Move tool and go over to the picture you've just pasted, you can move it about and it stays inside that circle. You can also resize it. If I just zoom out, you can see I've got my Show Transform Controls box ticked at the top, so I can resize my photo and still move it about, and it will stay trapped inside that circle. The Eyedropper tool lets you pick up specific colours from an image so that you can use them elsewhere. All you need to do is click on the tool with the eyedropper in and then go over to your picture and just click, and that's going to pick up the colour for you. You've got your colours on the bottom left of the screen, so if I click into that here just to bring up the colour menu and click onto the red, you can see how just clicking somewhere picks up that colour so you can use it. So with that red, now I've got the red selected. If I click OK, I could go in and, for example, type some text, and I'll just leave that as Photoshop's default, and it's made it the exact same red as the spikes, which means it matches perfectly and I don't have to guess what colour it is or try and match it up manually. Photoshop lets you do it all really quickly just with a click of a button. The Spot Healing Brush tool allows you to remove marks and blemishes from a layer. This is especially helpful for photographs. If you've got a little bit in the photo that you think maybe is ruining the image, or maybe there's just something in there that you want to remove, you can use this tool to get rid of it. So on this photo I've got here, it's a mock-up image of a poster, but the wall's got this really big crack on the right hand side, which is kind of spoiling it a little bit for me. So I want to get rid of this crack. So I'm going to zoom in to make it easier. And then I've got the Spot Healing Brush selected, and then in the top under Type you want to make sure Content Aware is selected, and that means when I go to remove this crack in the wall, Photoshop's going to fill it in using its very clever technology to make it look like the rest of the wall. So it's not going to leave a big empty space, but it's going to kind of match it to try and make it look like the wall would look if it didn't have that crack in it. So all I need to do with my mouse is click and drag over the crack and then let go with my mouse, and Photoshop has got rid of that crack for me really easily. If I zoom out again, you can see that using that Content Aware, Photoshop has worked out what the rest of the background is and filled in the space to make it look like it perfectly matches with the rest of the wall. The brush tool is pretty self-explanatory, so it allows you to create brush strokes on your design. So I've got my dinosaur here again. I'm just going to make a new layer by going Layer, New, Layer. And now, because I've got my brush tool selected, I can just click with my mouse and drag to create brush strokes. To change the colour, go to the bottom of the tools, and then you've got these little colour blocks at the bottom. Click onto the top one, and then you can either choose a colour by dragging and clicking on the colour picker that comes up, or you can move your mouse over onto your design and you get a little eyedrop tool and you can click into that one to choose an exact colour, and that will change the colour of your brush. Along the top of the screen you've got a little drop down. If you click into there, you can make your brush bigger or smaller by dragging this slider. I made that one quite big. I can click into it again and drag it right down to make it really small. Clicking into here again, you've also got this hardness slider. If I just turn that all the way to 0 and make the size a bit bigger again, what this does is it gives your brush a softer edge, kind of like the feathering effect we used when we were looking at the Marquee tool. So you can see with this one, the edge is much softer and more blurry than it was when it was set to 100. You can choose different brushes by clicking into that drop down again and just looking down the list, opening and closing these little folders with the arrows to see all the different inbuilt Photoshop brushes. The Clone Stamp tool lets you replicate parts of an image by clicking and dragging with your mouse. So I've got my little puppy here. I've got my clone tool, so I'm just going to click on that there. And then if you go over to your design that you want to copy and you hit Alt on your keyboard and then click, that chooses the point at which you start to copy. If you go over somewhere else on your design and click and drag with your mouse, Photoshop picks up that original point where you clicked with your Alt key and it duplicates that part of the design where you're now clicking and dragging. So you can see I'm making a little copy of the puppy over here on the top of the grass. The eraser tool lets you erase parts of your design. So if you click that one and then go over to your design you're working on, you can click and drag to erase different parts of your layers. It will only erase bits on the layer that you're working on. So I've got my layer 2 selected, which if I just hide that, you can see it's all the brush strokes. If I erase the dinosaur, that's not going to work because it's not part of the layer that I'm on. But if I click onto the dinosaur layer in the layers palette, now I can erase parts of that dinosaur. So I'm going to undo that. To change the size of your eraser, very similar to the paintbrush tool, you can go up in here and then you can make it either larger or smaller. Oops, choose the right layer and I can get rid of that. Right clicking on the eraser tool brings up these other options as well, and the magic eraser tool is quite fun to use and it can speed up your workflow because this lets you erase blocks of the same colour with just one click. So if I click onto this big red patch at the bottom, all I need to do is click once and it disappears. The paint bucket tool lets you fill different parts of your design with a different colour. So if I go down to my colour picker down here, let's say I want a green dinosaur instead. So I'll choose a green and click OK. Make sure I've got my dinosaur layer selected and then go over to the blue and just click with my mouse and it will fill it in with the different colour. So you can do that on any different parts of your design. So I could go in and I could change all of his spikes to purple, and I could even change the background colour by going into the colour picker again, choosing what colour I want to make it, clicking on my background layer and the layers palette, and then just clicking and it will fill that all in with my colour for me. If you right click on the paint bucket tool, you can see there's another option in there called gradient tool, and this lets you create fun gradients on your designs. If you click into the box at the top, you can see several default gradients that Photoshop gives you, or you can make your own. So to make your own, you can click on any of these ones, but I normally choose the first one, which by default picks up your foreground and background colour. If you go down to the little boxes at the bottom, you can click into them and then click where it says colour and then colour pick to choose a colour, or you can click and drag in the box here. So I've chosen a light green and a dark green. I'm going to click OK on here and then I'm going to go to my magic wand tool that we covered earlier, and then with my dinosaur layer selected I'm going to click into his body. Make sure I just get his other leg selected as well by hitting shift and clicking again. I'm going to go back to my gradient tool and then I've already chosen my green colours, so all I need to do is click and drag and then let go, and it's filled my dinosaur with that gradient. So if I click off it, you can see he now starts light at his head and goes down dark near the tail as the gradient is applied. We briefly touched on the text tool earlier, but we're going to go over it in a little bit more detail now. When you've got the text tool selected, you can click and drag to create a text box. Photoshop will automatically fill that in with some dummy text, and that's a new feature in Photoshop 2019. To get rid of the default, all you need to do is type. And by default, the colour it will choose is the one in your foreground colour down here. To change the colour, just click and drag with your mouse, and then click into the colour box at the top. And then you can either choose from the box in here, or you can put your mouse over your design and click a part of it to colour pick that exact colour. You've got a menu along the top which lets you do things like change the font if I click into here. So you can choose whatever font you want. And then you can choose the weight. So this font doesn't have any weights, but other ones it will let you make things bold and italic and things like that. The next drop down is the size. So this goes up to 72 pixels, which will make it quite larger. If you want it even bigger than that, you can just type into the box and it will make it nice and big. I'm not really liking that font. It makes it quite hard to read, so I'm just going to choose a different one. There we go. Okay, so you've also got options along here which let you choose how the text is displayed. This doesn't have much of a difference. You can see as I'm changing it, it's only changing a little tiny bit. Smooth is normally a good one to pick because it makes your text look nice and smooth around the edges, which gives it a bit more of a cleaner appearance. If I click and drag again, you've also got alignment options, so left align, center align, and right align. The next box, as we've already seen, is your colour, and then the one on the right of that lets you warp your text. So for example, we could put it into an oval shape. The next tool, if I select it all again, is the character box. And this kind of has a lot of what it does in the top menu, so you can change the font and the size, but it gives you other options too, such as setting how far apart you want your letters to be. So that's put quite a big gap between them. And also how much you want your line spacing to be if you have different lines of text. So if I make this smaller and add in another, it's a dinosaur. If I change this little line here, you can see it's increased the gap between the two different lines. You've also got these options along the bottom to make it bold. Oops, I need to click and select bold along here, or italic, all capitals, a kind of mixture of capitals, big ones and little ones. You can subscript and superscript, you can underline, and you can also strike through. Now you can combine these, so if I wanted all capitals and strike through, for example, I could do that in there. When you're happy with the text, just click away from it by clicking into the Marquee tool, and now your text is there, nice and ready for you. If you want to change the text at any point, click into your text tool, go over to where your text is and just single click with your mouse, and it will bring up the box again, so you can make your changes, whatever you want to do, and then apply them. The icon that appears kind of near the bottom might appear fairly different depending on which one you've got selected, as it contains lots of different shape tools. If I just choose rectangle tool at the top, this lets you draw rectangles on your design. Just like with the text tool, by default it will pick up your main foreground colour, but you can click the fill button at the top to change the colour. Or, as another way to do it, if I just get rid of that, you can go over to your layers palette on the right hand side, double click on the little box, and that will bring up your main colour picker, so you can click and drag to choose in here, or go over to your design and click to use the eyedropper tool. If you want to draw a perfect square, when you're clicking and dragging, hold Shift with your keyboard, and then that will make it a perfect square as opposed to a rectangle. If you right click on your shape tool, you've got all the different options down here. So ellipse tool lets you draw circles and ovals. So again, for an oval, just going to hide that one over there. For an oval, just click and drag. For an exact circle, click and hold shift. You've also got a polygon tool to let you make shapes with different sides. So for example, an octagon. If you want to make a triangle, then just go up to the top where it says sides, change that to 3, and now that'll make it a triangle for you. And similarly, whatever number you put in there will be the number of sides you get on your shape. You've got a line tool in here as well, which will draw straight lines for you. You can see mine's got a little arrow on the end. That's because in the top menu along here, you've got a little cog icon. Click into there and you can choose to put arrows at the start and the end, or both if you want to. So if I untick that and just put the weight in the next box up a bit, this time my line is thicker and it doesn't have that arrow at the end. If you want your line to be completely straight, so vertical or horizontal, press shift when you're drawing it and then it will constrain it to make sure that it's perfectly horizontal or vertical, or you can also do it on a 45-degree angle. Again, to change the colour, just go over to the layers palette, find the one you want, double click on the box, and then you can change the colour to whatever you want it to be. Finally, if we go back over to the tools palette and right click, there's a custom shape tool. Go back up to the top menu and you can see near the end it says shape and you've got a little drop down. So you can go in here to choose from all of Photoshop's default shapes, and you can also load your own into here as well. If I choose the paw print, I can click and drag to make it. If you want it to remain exactly in proportion, hit the shift key down when you're resizing. And that has made a little paw print for me. To change the shape, just go in at the top again, select a different one, and now when you click and drag, it will be that other shape instead. The final tool I'm going to show you is the zoom tool. When you're making designs, especially if they're quite small or if you're working on a very small part of something, it's really handy to be able to zoom in to see easier what you're doing. So click onto that one, onto the zoom tool, and then just click anywhere to zoom, and then you've got the scroll bars down the bottom and along the side to let you move to where you want to go. And click again, and it will zoom in some more. Along the top menu, you've got a little plus magnifying glass and minus. If you hit the minus one and then click, that'll zoom you out instead. Now, I don't usually use the tool by clicking the tool palette because you can do this using keyboard shortcuts, which makes it a little bit easier. So Control and plus on your keyboard will zoom in, and Control and minus will zoom out. Now, I realise that this video has been a little bit of an information overload and I've gone through everything quite quickly. As I said at the beginning, there are loads of tools in that menu, and I probably missed more than I actually went over. However, the ones that I did cover are the ones that you'll be using most often in your graphic design. So if you take some time to have a little play with all of the ones I went through and just create some test graphics, you know, they don't have to be perfect, they can just be a little bit of a mess like my poor old dinosaur here. But just get yourself used to what all the different tools do and how you use them, and the more comfortable you can get with them, the easier your designing experience will be.